Reincarnation. It's such a tricky topic to broach. I don't really know where to start. It's just a belief, what I have. You don't get too many Christian people making videos like, this is why I believe in heaven, or this is why I believe in hell. You don't get too many atheist people making videos like, well, this is why I believe that my body is going to turn into worm food when I die. But I had a conversation a couple of months ago with a friend of mine, good friend of mine, Christian friend of mine. And he said, well, of course you'd say that. I can't even remember what the specific back and forth was, like the verbal exchange, but it was very funny, very pithy. He was like, of course you'd say that. You believe in Valhalla. You're retarded. And I thought to myself, do Christians really believe that pagans believe in Valhalla? And then I started Googling. I started searching. I found all the pagans who believe in Valhalla. I didn't realize that many young men, in the same way that they've adopted Christianity as a political statement, it isn't really about Jesus. It's about preserving culture, preserving demographics, preserving tradition. And it's admirable. Many young men, too, have adopted paganism as a kind of reactionary defense mechanism. They've adopted paganism because they see all of the same problems with society as the Christians, but they also see Christianity as part of the problem. It's Jewish too, isn't it? So they have adopted this kind of like fake paganism. Many Christians and many pagans get their understanding and their opinions and their views of paganism from the TV show Vikings. This is where I get my understanding of paganism from. This is the ancient Egyptian Book of the Dead. This is an account of how your soul, how your immaterial essence, what the Egyptians called Bah, how your Bah moves from host to host upon death. And the Egyptians were not, by any means, were not the only pre-Christian pagan group from antiquity that believed in this. The Celts, the Druids, the Romans, the Greeks, at least the initiated spiritual caste of each group, always seemed to believe in reincarnation. It's what Pythagoras taught, it's what Plato taught, it's what Empedocles taught. It's been a prevailing and commonly held, that's what I think a lot of people don't understand, a commonly held belief in Europe, well, for as far back as we have written, recorded history. Even Thomas Aquinas, in his Summa Theologica, in his great treatise on Catholicism, has to reference reincarnation as a belief. Admittedly, he's referencing it to critique it, to criticize it. But the fact that he has to bring it up proves to you that even in Catholic medieval times, many people in Europe believed in the transmigration of the human soul. And this is a fucking conundrum for me. Like, this is a problem because now I feel like I have to re-educate a bunch of pagans too, as well as a bunch of Christians. So let's just cover the facts. Firstly, reincarnation is not an Eastern or an Indian belief system, as we are so often told. It is a fundamental and integral part of Western spirituality and religion. It stretches back through Egypt, through Greece, through Rome, and it is the bedrock of Western philosophy. Some people go as far as to argue that it was explicitly taught by Jesus Christ himself, and whether or not that is actually true, it is a fact that reincarnation was a commonly held belief amongst Christians as late as the 6th century CE. That's 6 centuries after the death of Christ. Many of his followers still held to reincarnation as a mainstream belief. There has been a systematic erasure of this belief from the European consciousness, and if you ask me, it represents one of the most successful acts of cultural amnesia in history. You do not have to look at the ancient Egyptian Book of the Dead to see this, although I really would recommend it. There are texts from the Egyptian Old Kingdom 2,400 years before Jesus Christ that contain detailed descriptions about the soul's cyclical journey through different forms and different states of existence. The Egyptian priesthood taught that these doctrines were legit for millennia. This was before having any contact with India. And this is what would go on to form the foundations of Pythagorean and Greek philosophy. If you look at the Celtic tradition and Julius Caesar's accounts of the Gallic Wars, he, quote, "The principal point of the Druids' doctrine is that the soul does not die, and that after death it passes from one body to another." Julius Caesar himself noted that the belief made the Celtic warriors so fucking fearless because they didn't fear death. They just saw it as a transition. The Celtic belief in transmigration was indigenous to Europe and developed independently of any Eastern influence. By the time we get to Pythagoras, the pioneer of Western civilization, who himself studied in Egypt for 22 years and learned from the priest class there before establishing his own school in Croton in Italy, Pythagoras claimed to remember his own past lives, including one as a Trojan warrior. Pythagoras has this incredible quote: "The soul is immortal. The soul undergoes successive reincarnations until achieving purification through a philosophical understanding." Pythagoreans, the followers of Pythagoras, they practiced vegetarianism, partly because they believed that animal souls could house reincarnated human ones. Then there's the great Empedocles, about 490 BC, who's famous for saying, "But I have already been a boy and a girl, a bush and a bird and a dumb fish in the sea." Famous for saying that the soul must wander through mortal forms for thrice 10,000 seasons as punishment for its spiritual crimes. If you look into the Orphic mysteries, about 6 centuries before Jesus, you have this cult of people who inscribed gold tablets that contained the initiate's instructions for the soul's journey after death, that they buried them with. And by the time you get to Plato, about 400 years before Jesus, in the Republic, it says the soul of man is immortal and imperishable. Cicero, one of the greatest Roman statesmen and philosophers, I'm quoting Cicero now, "The ancients, whether they were seers or interpreters of the divine mind in the tradition of the sacred rites, appear to have known the truth when they affirmed that we are born into the body to pay the penalty for the sins committed in a former life." Metempsychosis is what the Greeks and the Romans referred to this as. It is possible to descend from man to beast and from beast to man again, says Plotinus, father of Neoplatonism, 200 years before Jesus Christ. And when we get to Jesus Christ himself, we have this quote: "But Elijah has already come. They just did not recognize him, but did unto him whatever they pleased. For the prophets and the law prophesied until John, and if you are willing to accept it, he is Elijah who has come." If you look at the early Christian fathers, people like Origen of Alexandria, who believed that every soul comes into the world strengthened from previous victories or weakened from prior defeats in a past life, you can see that this was a founding part of early Christian doctrine. That this was the consensus among early Christians from about the 2nd to about the 6th century CE. They believed in a doctrine of the soul's pre-existence, and it was a commonly held belief. Church historians note that reincarnation was so widespread amongst followers in the 6th century that they had to issue decrees about it. Pope Vigilus refused to attend most of his council sessions during his papacy as a protest to the pressure from Emperor Justinian to condemn Origen's original teachings. That means a pope refused to speak out against reincarnation at the time. We don't have to stick with Christianity either. I don't know how familiar you are with the Cathars, the Cathar Christians, about as Christian as Mormons are. The Cathar Christians who lived in the south of France in medieval times. Estimates suggest that between 200,000 and 1 million Cathar Christians were murdered at the stake for the Catholic Church in what was called the Albigensian Crusade. The Cathars of the south of France held the belief that reincarnation was real as part of their core principal teachings, and they considered this to be Christian practice. Giordano Bruno, the Renaissance martyr against the church, who was put to death in 1600 precisely for teaching a belief in reincarnation, said the following, quote, "I have held and hold souls to be immortal. Speaking as a Catholic, they do not pass from body to body, but go to paradise, purgatory, or hell. But I have reasoned deeply, and speaking as a philosopher, since these souls not be found within the body, and yet is not body, it may be in one body or the other, and pass from one body to the next." Giordano Bruno was burned at the stake for professing this belief. But if Christians don't do it for you, check out the work of Benjamin Franklin, who composed his own epitaph aged 22, which read, "Here lies the body of B. Franklin, printer, like the cover of an old book, its contents torn out and stripped of its lettering and its gilding, lies here, food for the worms. But the work shall not wholly be lost, for it will, as he believed, appear once more in a new and more perfect edition, corrected and amended by the author." Voltaire, David Hume, Immanuel Kant, Goethe, William Wordsworth, Ralph Waldo Emerson, Henry David Thoreau, Walt fucking Whitman, Vincent van Gogh, Thomas Edison, Henry Ford, General George S. Patton, Carl Jung, to name a few. In the early 2000s, an MD of psychology, a chap by the name of Ian Stevenson, conducted at the University of Virginia School of Medicine a study into 2,500 documented cases of children with verifiable past life experiences. His methodology is fascinating. It involves looking at birthmarks and corresponding them to fatal wounds that people claimed to have attained in previous lives. His work suggests something profound, and it represents one of the most rigorous scientific investigations into reincarnation ever conducted within a Western institution. But that's not why I believe in it. I don't believe in it because of Ralph Waldo Emerson or Walt Whitman or Oscar Wilde. I believe in it because of Vettius Valens. I believe in it because of traditional Hellenistic astrology. I believe it because once you've looked at a couple of birth charts, it becomes painfully fucking clear that the North Lunar Node and South Lunar Node show a trajectory through life. So I leave you with some critical questions. I'm not hoping to convince you of the legitimacy of my belief. What I believe won't change based on what you think, and I'm sure vice versa. But if it was taught by Egyptian priests for millennia, if it was central to Pythagorean and Platonic philosophy, the literal bedrock of Western foundation, if it was accepted by Rome's greatest minds, people like Cicero, if it was allegedly referenced explicitly by Jesus Christ and several times in the Gospels, if it was taught by Origen, Christianity's most early influential theologian, if it was believed by millions of Europeans, Christian Europeans for 6 centuries, if the Cathars were put to death by the sword, genocided for believing in it, if even Thomas Aquinas had to engage seriously with it, if the Celtic Druids believed in it, if it was good enough for Franklin, for Voltaire, for Hume, for Kant, for Goethe, for Wordsworth, then why the fuck isn't it good enough for you? And why, more importantly, would the institutional church seek to systematically suppress and erase something that is quintessentially European and a fundamental spiritual teaching? What theological, or dare I say political purpose would have been served by removing from the faithful a belief that offers profound answers, not just to suffering or to inequality, but to divine justice? Is it possible that a doctrine that places spiritual evolution in the hands of the individual soul across multiple lifetimes may have threatened the ecclesiastical structure that positioned itself as the sole intermediary between humans and salvation? When we consider that the formal condemnation came not from theological consensus, but actually from a politically motivated council under Emperor Justinian's influence, when we consider that the Pope himself at the time protested against the council's proceedings, when we consider that the Cathars were murdered by the million, not for what was a theological error, but for threatening the power of the church, for the same reason they burned Giordano Bruno alive at the stake, and we have to ask, what's being hidden from us? What power does the church maintain by convincing millions of Europeans that they only have one life, one chance, one attempt at salvation? Reincarnation is not Eastern, it is not foreign, it is not an import. It is your ancestral European wisdom, stolen from you by an institution that has feared giving you freedom and feared the power of individual souls.